Hello, YouTube, and welcome back to another book review from me, your humble narrator, Logan Albright. Today I'm continuing my series of reviewing the Penguin science fiction classics that I discovered over in England in these amazing minimalist editions that I really love. I have one more of these to do after this one, but I'm going to take a break after this one and read some other books and then come back to it. But this one I'm really excited to talk to you about because, like every book in this series that I've read pretty much, I find this a really fascinating novel. I find it very unique and very different from other stuff I've read, and I'm like so excited by discovering this series because it's given me a window into so much literary work that I otherwise didn't know about, and I'm just like blown away by everything that they've done. So real kudos to Penguin for putting together this collection of just amazing books. And this one is called The Hair Carpet Weavers. It's by Andreas Eschbach. He's a German writer. This is translated from the German into English. And this is a little bit more modern than most of the books in the series. They are marketed as science fiction classics. And depending on what your definition of a classic is, I think the translation only came out in 2005, but the original German edition is from 1995, which is maybe a little modern to be considered a classic, but it certainly does live up to the name in terms of quality. I didn't know when it came out when I started reading it. I read the whole thing thinking it was like from the 70s, and then discovered that it was from the 90s after I finished it. But the quality is just outstanding, and it's such a strange little book, but so good and so interesting in so many different ways. So I want to talk about it a little bit and see if I can get you interested in it too. So The Hair Carpet Weavers is a science fiction novel, and it's about, starts on this planet where they have this trade of making carpets out of human hair. And there's a master carpet maker, and they spend their entire life making one carpet out of the hair of their wives and daughters. And they are extremely intricate and beautiful works of craftsmanship. And they make them and sell them, and the revenue they get from selling them is supposed to care for their son's entire life, to be enough revenue for him to live on for his entire life, so that he too can devote his life towards making hair carpets. And the hair carpets are then sent to be sold at market, and they are allegedly taken to the palace of the emperor, where they are used to decorate the palace. So that's kind of the setup of the book. But it's got this really interesting structure to it, where it doesn't follow a main character. Like most novels, you have your protagonist, you have your main character, and you follow their story. This book doesn't do that. Every chapter in this book is like its own separate little short story almost, but they're all linked and they're all set in the same world and the same universe. And they kind of gradually zoom out in terms of resolution, because you start off with the story of this one hair carpet weaver, and you kind of learn a little bit about what his life is like and what his world is like and what his planet is like, and you kind of zoom back a little bit. And as the book goes on, you find out more and more about the planet, and then about the galaxy where the planet takes place in, and then about the whole universe, and you learn about the political structure, and you learn about the emperor, and you learn all this more detail about the world that started off very high resolution on this one little story, and then became more low resolution when you're showing all this kind of big picture about the entire galaxy. So that kind of structure of the chapters I found very interesting and very strange, because you don't usually see that. I think you're more likely to see the opposite, where you start off broad and then you zoom in on one individual story. Like I think about the beginning of Psycho, where it starts off showing the entire city, and then it kind of zooms in on this one individual story. But this does the opposite. And so you're sort of trying to solve this mystery throughout as you're reading it. You're like, what's really going on here? Why are these people spending their entire lives making hair carpets? How did this tradition start? What's the deal? And you're not given the answer until the very, very end of the book. And I'm not going to spoil it for anybody, of course, because you should read it and find out. But there's this kind of underlying mystery of trying to figure out what's going on as the story progresses. And you're given little glimpses into this through the different lives of the people who are profiled in the different stories, and what's going on with their lives and how they interact with the world and the universe. So I think the world building is fantastic. It's so creative and so interesting. The characters are really interesting. There's a lot of weird different types of characters that are profiled, and not the ones you would necessarily expect. And then I think the structure is so interesting, because it's not written like any other novel I've ever really read. And so I found that completely fascinating as well. So there's that to recommend the book. The mystery is incredibly compelling, and I found this conclusion to the mystery very, very satisfying. I was worried throughout that I was not going to get a satisfying resolution to what was going on at the end, because a lot of books I've been reading lately have very open-ended endings, and you're not really sure what's going on even after you finish reading the book. And that can be okay. I don't really mind that necessarily, but sometimes you want things wrapped up for you in a little bow. And this, I think, has a very satisfying conclusion, but with leaving you with just enough ambiguity, I guess, to be tantalizing. So I really like that. The other thing I really like about the book is the kind of broader themes that it addresses about society. And so there's all these things. I mean, I feel like I could spend years thinking about this book and trying to figure out what it's really saying and all the different themes that it addresses. But even on just one reading and thinking about it for about a week, there's so much that it says about the nature of, duty and work and life and religion and reverence and tradition and habit and all these different things that are kind of folded into this entire solar system that this author has built. Or this universe, this galaxy that this author has built. And I think, I like books like that they really give you a lot to think about, because it's not just limited to the story of one protagonist and what happens to him. It's about all of life, and you can really take a lot away from it in terms of how you think about your own life and how you think about your own obligations and how you think about your own traditions and your own mindset towards open-mindedness, your relationship with authority, your goals of what you're trying to accomplish with your life and what the meaning of life is, whether it matters, whether certain things that you think matter actually matter. I'm being kind of vague in this section because I don't want to give anything away about the book, but I just think, there's just so much here. There's so much meat to this story. There's so many things you could take away from it. And I really like that. I think that's great, because so many, especially more modern books that I've read, and I tend to have a bias towards classics on this channel and in my reading in general. The more modern books I've read, I always find a little bit unsatisfying because they feel a little shallow. They feel like they're telling one story that doesn't have broader applicability to the real world and to kind of implicit life lessons you can take from it. And I'm not talking about, being preachy or being didactic or being allegorical, but I'm talking about applicability. If you tell stories that have real resonance and really, capture what life is really like and are really honest, you're going to be able to find ways to apply that to your own life and to the way you think about the world in ways that are deeper than just one story. And you don't have to be hit over the head with it. You don't have to be told that that's what they're doing. But it's just the nature of storytelling. And it's what makes storytelling so magic and so wonderful, is being able to have that window in through fiction, through what is essentially a lie, through a story that someone made up that didn't really actually happen. You're able to gain insight into the nature of life by applying the lessons of that story to your own experience in the real world. And that's what makes great fiction great. And that's what I think makes the Hair Carpet Weavers great, is there's just so much to think about in terms of how we relate to the world and how we relate to power structures and authority figures and our own routines that we enact in life, our own kind of script that we act out in life for ourselves. I just think it's amazing. And so there are a couple of recurring characters that show up throughout the book. Like I said, I wouldn't say there's such a thing as a main character, but there are a couple of recurring figures that show up throughout the book, and they kind of represent different aspects of the world. So, you have the people who are extremely devoted to tradition and maintaining what has always the way things have always been, and who refuse to break from that. And then you have people who are more rebellious. There's a whole faction of people who are in rebellion against the emperor and the empire, and they want to bring about a new world. And you see that side of it as well. And you have these two different kind of warring ideologies clashing. And so you have lots of different little individual characters, some of them who show up a couple of times, some of them who you only see once and then disappear, who kind of represent different worldviews, different ways of seeing the universe. And I don't think that they're painted in terms of like this side is right and this side is wrong. I think they're just painted in this is the way people are. And, there's different ways of looking at the world, and there's benefits and there's drawbacks to both of them. So anyway, I don't want to go on too much longer. I don't really know what else to say about the Hair Carpet Weavers, but I did find it just a lovely, beautiful, creative work. I think that it's visually very beautiful. Like he describes things in a very visual way a lot of the time, and I can have very clear pictures in my head of what the planets looked like and what the societies looked like. I think it would make a beautiful movie. Although I don't know how you really tell the story in a movie format. It may not work, but like in terms of the setting, it would be, I'd really love to see that on film, because that would be beautiful. And it's just such a different kind of book, and it's something I haven't really, read anything like it before. Like I said, it is originally written in German, and I haven't read very much German literature in my lifetime. I've read a little bit with a little Goethe and things like that, But it's nice to see someone who's such clear original thinking. And I think this book won some awards. I think it's the author's first novel, so I'll have to check and see if he's done anything else, because it really is a remarkable work, and I do recommend it to anybody who's interested in science fiction or fantastical literature in general, people who like world building, people who like kind of maybe a more political take on science fiction, sort of like Dune, maybe something like that. But if you're interested in any of those things and you want just a really different, compelling story that's going to, I think, knock your socks off, I think The Hair Carpet Weavers is a remarkable find, and I'm really glad I found it, and I can't wait to read the last book that I currently have in this series. I'll probably try to get more in the future. It's a little hard because I have to order them from overseas, but it's great. Check it out. Check out the series in general if you haven't yet. I really just think that they've curated it so well, and you may not be able to get these editions depending on where you live, but you can get other editions of them. There's a book that I did a review of years ago called The Siberiad by Stanislaw Lem, the Polish author, that I always thought was amazing and just a remarkable science fiction story. That's in here in this edition. There's an H.P. Lovecraft one in here. There's Flatland by Edwin Abbott, I think it is. Which is a really kind of interesting scientific allegorical look at dimensionality, just a very short thing. So lots of the curation is outstanding. It's fantastic. So check those out. I'm going to read something different next week. I'm actually in the middle of reading a Henry James novel, and that may take me a little while to get through because Henry James is not the easiest writer to read at speed. So I'm going to get through that as soon as I can, and I'll review it for you guys. But maybe something different next week. We'll see. I haven't worked it out yet. But I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you will pick up some of these books I'm talking about and immerse yourself in them because they are just so gorgeous. But until next time, I've been your host, Logan Albright. Thanks so much for watching. Take it easy.